The Eighth Amendment of the United States of America states that no cruel or unusual punishments should be inflicted on any member of the United States, whether or not they are incarcerated or free. Even when imprisoned in America, citizens are still granted all of their basic human rights. The tricky part about this amendment of the Constitution is that cruel and unusual is never defined. The Constitution is a living document, which means it can be interpreted differently through different periods of time and is always changing.
Cruel and unusual punishment have always been a heavily debated topic in America's history, especially today. It has been debated what the true definition of cruel and unusual is and what punishments have gone too far in our country. Torture has been a controversial issue for a very long time in our country. To many people, the forms of torture that the United States is using on prisoners of war and prisoners has been seen as extremely cruel. Since the September 11, 2001 attacks on the USA, the U.S. government authorized the use of enhanced interrogation techniques on prisoners of war to get information from them. Many people see it as extremely cruel and a very unneeded way to deal with these prisoners. What we are doing to these prisoners can cause lifelong, never-ending depression, nightmares, and terror. Many of the torture methods used today are strongly criticized by the American people, such as waterboarding and mock execution, as well as using prisoners with specific phobias against them and when being questioned. The prisoners have been left hanging naked inside dark rooms for months to having their families treated to be killed and forced to. Many U.S. officials do see this action as cruel and unusual, but still some do not agree. Many still argue that these interrogations techniques do not constitute torture and should not be allowed. So do you think torturing prisoners of war and potential terrorists should be considered as cruel and unusual and against human rights? What can anyone do to stop it?
Controversial issue for many years. Solitary confinement is the act of imprisoning and isolating someone in a closed-off cell for approximately 24 hours a day with no human interaction. These prisoners can be held in these cells for a few days all the way to several years and even decades. Solitary confinement cells are usually about 6 by 9 feet with a slot for food and concrete furniture matching the walls. Prisoners are put in solitary confinement after disobeying orders, being violent in prison, or having drugs in prison. In South Carolina, 16 prisoners were sentenced to a decade in solitary confinement after being caught using Facebook. The effects of solitary confinement are psychologically detrimental to prisoners. Prisoners in solitary confinement have been reported as severely depressed and anxious, as well as having trouble sleeping, hallucinations, and severe paranoia. Prisoners often become extremely disoriented with time because they do not have clocks, and small things like the buzzing of a light in their cell can lead the prisoners to madness.
It's not to the point where you want to commit suicide. But sometimes I'm at the point that I be wanting to write the judge, say, just give me the death penalty.
But it is not only adult prisoners suffering the fate of solitary confinement, but children and minors as well. The suicide rate for juveniles in solitary confinement is much higher than in a normal jail, and half of all suicides by prisoners happen in these confinement cells. When one 13-year-old boy was held in solitary confinement at an adult prison, he attempted suicide almost 5 times a day, every day. So the question is then asked, how much is too much? Should solitary confinement be considered as cruel and unusual because of the tragic mental and physical effects it is having on prisoners? Or should there be a cap on the amount of years someone is held in solitary confinement?
Another largely debated issue in our country is the use of death penalty as a punishment of someone committing a serious crime. After the perpetrator is found guilty, they are given either imprisonment or death penalty.
After given the death penalty sentence, prisoners usually wait on death row for years to decades before they are actually killed. 32 states in the United States use lethal injection as their primary method, But since 1976, there have also been cases of electrocution, gas chambers, firing squad, and hangings.
Not only is the death penalty used for prisoners who committed serious crimes, but unfortunately, in many cases, it has been unfairly sentenced to citizens who were later found to be innocent and released. Since 1976, there has been over 155 people released from death row after being found innocent.
There was a dramatic spike in the number of executions in the United States during the early 2000s and late 90s. The number of total executions since then has dropped, but there are still over 2,000 people on death row.
Of the 900 killers on death row in California since 1976, only 13 have been executed and the rest have died of natural causes or still await execution. This number is shocking and scary to think about because of how little the death penalty is actually being used and how many inmates have been sitting on the death row awaiting certain death.
The death penalty brings back methods used a very long time ago that seem completely barbaric to people today to bring back into society. It is also seen as random because not all murderers are being given equal sentencing, and some are being thrown into death row because of money, lawyers, and juries.
The use of the death penalty is as cruel to many people in the United States, and many would love to see abolished. Why are we killing people who are being persecuted for that very same reason of committing murder?
The Eighth Amendment of the United States clearly tries to protect all citizens against cruel and unusual punishment, as well as stopping our citizens from conducting these inhumane acts. But does this amendment serve its job correctly, or are there too many flaws in the way we perceive what is cruel and unusual and what is not?